Hey ABS 470 students, Dr. Jared Rathel here, and I'm elated to present to you today my dissertation research from Utah State University. So I started this project in the fall of 2013 and defended my dissertation in April 2017, meaning I spent 4 years of my life really thinking deeply about these issues. My take-home point for you today is that the conservation of large mammals like American black bears, like gray wolves, like mountain lions, if we are to conserve these large mammals into the 21st century, it's going to depend upon humanity's ability to coexist with them in shared landscapes. And this coexistence is going to hinge on our ability, on your ability to conduct sound science in spite of all of the cultural noise from both the right as well as the left. In this case study, I hope to illustrate to you the importance of data-driven wildlife management. So it's a tricky issue. How do we manage potentially dangerous predators in human-dominated landscapes? But I hope this gives you some insight into the types of issues that wildlife managers grapple with in the age of the Anthropocene. It also is a very nice window into the graduate experience. So the title of my presentation is Integrating Black Bear Behavior, Their Spatial Ecology, and their population dynamics in a human-dominated landscape, implications for management. So the way this works is in Canvas, you'll find a Word doc entitled Module 6 case study, Managing Black Bears in the Anthropocene. So the expectation is that you follow along with this presentation, and from time to time I'll ask you to put me on pause and answer a handful of questions. It's a Word doc, so you can just put your answers right into the document that you upload to Canvas. The questions that are in your case study that you're expected to reflect upon are in bright yellow, and I'll ask you throughout. And I'm going to go over all of this, so if you follow along, it should be a really easy 10 points. Today we're going to specifically hone in on northwestern New Jersey. And we're going to examine their newly re-implemented and highly contentious black bear hunt. So I say newly implemented, although the hunt was first brought back in 2003, it's been on again and off again for the past 20 years. Most recently, the Democratic governor of New Jersey announced just a few weeks ago that he was going to reinstate the regulated harvest of black bears. This is December 2022. Herein, I'm going to ask you to re-examine your preconceived conceptions about recreational harvest. So you may have been taught that recreational harvest is an old, conventional tool that wildlife managers use to meet population objectives, and this definitely holds true in our case. But I'm also going to ask you to consider harvest as a powerful selective force that is capable of shaping carnivore behavior, reducing human-carnivore conflicts in anthropogenic landscapes, and ultimately increasing the viability of these carnivore species by increasing our cultural carrying capacity for them. I know that's a lot. So right out of the gates here for problem number one, I know that you know very little about black bear management and human-dominated landscapes in the mid-Atlantic states like New Jersey. But I'd like for you to comment on how you feel personally about the American black bear still being harvested in the 21st century. In 4 to 5 sentences, tell me whether you think bears should still be a big game species. And in doing so, I want you to acknowledge how your life experiences, how your cultural perspectives may have impacted your conclusion. So, for example, full disclosure, I've harvested a number of white-tailed deer in my life, lots of dove growing up, and even an elk in Utah. But I am a meat hunter, and I've never had any desire to hunt for predators. And I'm kind of coming into this project, I kind of had a mixed perspective about bear hunts. But I quickly learned that this was not about me and my personal opinions. Good scientists are going to be driven by the data. We're going to try and recognize our own personal biases, and in doing so, strive at all costs for objectivity in our research. So the types of things that you can comment on here: do you hunt? If you don't hunt, do you eat meat? If you do eat meat, you're not a vegetarian. Do you know where your meat comes from? Are you familiar with the industrialized meat production system in the Western world? Have you ever lived in an area characterized by high rates of human-carnivore interaction? So these are the types of things that I ask that you reflect upon. All right, so this case study is composed of 5 parts. Initially, I'll deliver just a brief introduction on the age of the Anthropocene, because we've touched on it in former lectures. Specifically, we're going to be thinking about the plight of large mammals in the Anthropocene, and the New Jersey black bear specifically as a large mammalian carnivore that represents a winner in the Anthropocene. I'm going to present to you 3 of my dissertation chapters. The first focused on human black bear interactions, for which there were over 26,000 of them. Specifically, we're going to focus on those bear behaviors that caused conflict. So bears knocking down bird feeders, getting into people's trash, breaking into their garages, knocking over their grills, eating their pet food, and we'll talk about some of those behaviors. And then we'll focus on cause-specific mortality rates of these bears. So how are they dying, and what are they dying from? In the second chapter, we're going to think about black bear spatial ecology in this human-dominated landscape. It's a landscape with a lot of concrete, farms, neighborhoods. Specifically, we're going to think about how a bear's conflict history, whether it's identified in the database as a problem bear because it's gotten into trouble in the past, how that conflict history influences how the bear uses the landscape. And then finally, I'll present to you our population projections that we estimated using survival and fertility rates that we estimated as well under various harvest scenarios. And then I'll conclude with what we recommend in terms of black bear management in New Jersey. So let's begin with the age of the Anthropocene. On July 16th, 1945, about 400 miles to the east, humanity detonated its first nuclear weapon, leaving a detectable plutonium-239 signature in the geologic record all around the planet and delineating the beginning of a new epoch, the Anthropocene. So regardless of its official start date, the Anthropocene is characterized by a great acceleration that begins in the early 1950s, following the end of World War II and the great baby boom. So there was this huge demographic increase in humanity, as well as an incredible increase in our consumption rates as we began to live the American dream, the house in the suburbs, a car in every driveway, and a chicken in every pot. So the y-axis here could be represented by any number of metrics. So world population growth, we just recently hit 8 billion a few months ago. This is fall 2022. It could be water use, could be fertilizer consumption, it could be greenhouse gas production. Doesn't matter what you put on the y-axis, the pattern is always the same. This exponential consumption. So this is really the beginning of our exploitation of the Earth's natural resources at an unparalleled scale in our history. So please put me on pause, you know the drill, and watch the 3-minute and 28-second video embedded in Canvas called Welcome to the Anthropocene. Really cool satellite footage, and then I want you to watch how that y-axis changes throughout the entire presentation, and then watch that inflection in the early 1950s as the Great Acceleration begins. In the age of the Anthropocene, we must recognize that humanity has now become planet Earth's fundamental ecological and evolutionary driver. So the loss of biodiversity is attributed to well understood causes like overexploitation. We talked about these pangolins last lecture that were confiscated. They were illegally trafficked for Asian markets. We understand that habitat loss is driving much of the loss of biodiversity, and you only need to look out your window to see it. We are transforming the Sonoran Desert into this oasis, unsustainable oasis of cookie-cutter houses. Less understood, however, are the non-linear dynamics that can cause rapid and large-scale state changes, wholesale changes in the nature of the system when planetary thresholds are exceeded. What do I mean by this? So what happens when we reach that tipping point and the Greenland ice sheet breaks off? Are we going to enter into a new climatic period within which we can't go back? Another really scary positive feedback loop is the release of insane amounts of methane from Siberian permafrost. We're already witnessing unprecedented bleaching of the Great Barrier Reef. There have been multiple mass bleaching events. Some 90% of the reef has experienced bleaching over the past decade. In the Anthropocene, no species is safe from our reach. So this is a pelagic seabird, and it's consumed all of this plastic pollution. So even species in far-flung oceans are affected by us. We are producing novel stressors for wildlife all around the planet. Some of the hardest hit taxa in the Anthropocene are large-bodied carnivores and the ungulates. So DeMarco et al. Evaluated 498 carnivore and ungulate species, and this group found that a quarter of these species moved one or more IUCN categories closer to extinction in just the past 40 years. Consider the once super abundant saiga antelope pictured here. So they numbered over 2 million antelope in the 1950s, one of the largest populations of ungulates on the planet. The population has declined by 95% in the past 20 years. More than 120,000 saiga died. That's 40% of the remaining population in just 1 month in May of 2015. As a rapidly changing climate may have allowed a once harmless bacteria to become lethal. So if the superabundant saiga isn't even safe, then what is? We've talked about the Amur leopard, the most critically endangered large cat on the planet. There are about 100 individuals left. This is the saola. The saola wasn't even described by science until 1992, and it is critically endangered. Just as fast as we describe these species, we're losing them. These losses are especially disconcerting to us ecologists because we recognize the outsized role that large mammals play in structuring ecosystems. We've talked about how large carnivores can cause trophic cascades. Their removal causes all of these widespread perturbations in the system. Large herbivores, which we'll talk about next unit, are going to create grazing lawns, which are really, really important. Both these types of species, carnivores and ungulates, they're going to increase the resilience of the entire ecosystem, making it less likely to rapidly change states. That said, however, it is not all doom and gloom. There are some success stories. Several species of large carnivores, their populations have stabilized, and they're on the road to recovery in the most unlikely of places, in the human-dominated landscapes of Europe and North America. So here in Europe, wolverines, lynx, brown bears, and wolves are recovering. In the United States, black bears, as we'll talk about here shortly, have made a robust recovery on the East Coast. The gray wolf has been delisted in several western states, and mountain lions have been confirmed east of the Mississippi in Tennessee, Louisiana, and Arkansas. And finally, from near extinction in the late 1800s, the white-tailed deer population in the U.S. is now estimated at 30 million deer. The whitetail is truly a winner in the age of the Anthropocene. Despite these conservation successes, we find ourselves in an increasingly polarized society, where large segments of the population on both the left and the right side of the political spectrum mistrust science and seem to lack the ability to discern fake news from empirically derived scientific sources, from the peer-reviewed literature. This is exacerbated by a brave new world of disaggregated media where one doesn't need to go far to find support for his or her beliefs and protection from opposing viewpoints. So consider billboards such as this that sprang up in New Jersey while I was working on this project, comparing the tightly regulated black bear harvest to the Cecil the Lion firestorm. Or these kids, they were put in a cage in New Mexico to protect them from marauding Mexican wolves. It's just asinine. My point is that wildlife research doesn't happen in a vacuum. As scientists, it is our responsibility to place personal beliefs aside as we play a crucial role in providing the objective information for a diverse citizenry to make informed management decisions. So I'd like to introduce Petals. So Petals is a bipedal black bear. Petals has adapted to either an injury or a deformity, a birth defect, and walks around on two legs. So I start here for two reasons. Number one, Petals is obviously an extremely resilient individual and exemplifies the resilience of this species that has come roaring back from near extirpation. Secondly, for a whole host of psychological reasons, carnivores like black bears are going to elicit strong emotional responses in us. So this YouTube clip has been viewed by over 1.2 million people. So add to that total, put me on pause, and at least for a minute or so, check out the bipedal bear Petals. Black bears are an extremely adaptable species, capable of exploiting anthropogenic resources like garbage, like pet food, like bird feeders, even the occasional swimming pool on a hot summer day. So this sow, as evidenced by, and you can count them, her 5 healthy cubs, is doing quite well in the wildland-urban interface. This is a long video. It's 11 minutes. I don't expect you to watch it all, but definitely check out a minute or two of this family living in northwestern New Jersey. You can actually see she's got an ear tag on, one of our metal ear tags, as they watch this sow and her 5 cubs frolic in their pool. Unfortunately, not all of these human-bear interactions are amusing. So since 2001, there have been 7 documented black bear attacks on humans just in northwestern New Jersey. And 1 year after I started the project, on September 24th, 2014, there was a young man, a 22-year-old man. He was a college student at Rutgers. That was killed by a food-conditioned black bear. So we know that North American forests were replete with black bears when colonized by Europeans. We see lots of remains of black bears in the Native American middens. However, by the 1950s, black bears are nearly wiped out from northwestern New Jersey. It's estimated that there were less than 100 bears that survived in a handful of strongholds in northwestern New Jersey. Following being designated as game animals in 1953 and a 32-year hunting moratorium, the population rebounds to about 500 black bears in northwestern New Jersey by the mid-1990s. Then things rapidly change. So between the mid-1990s and 2009, the black bear population in northwestern New Jersey increases from about 500 bears to maybe as many as 3,500 bears. So that is a 540% increase in just 13 years. So in an attempt to curb this population growth, the New Jersey Division of Fish and Wildlife, or NJDFW, offers their first regulated black bear harvest in 32 years in 2003. However, there's a certain vocal segment of the population that goes into an uproar. They petition the New Jersey Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court shuts it down in 2004. It's reopened in 2005. It's again closed in 2006 through 2009. And it's reopened in 2010. And then it was shut down again. It's my understanding several years ago when the new Democrat governor of New Jersey was elected, only to be reopened again just a few weeks ago. So all this opening and closing of the black bear harvest Again, we have to see this as objective scientists. So this represents a treatment. So what does the bear population do when it's harvested? What does the bear population do when it's not harvested? How do conflicts respond to harvest? How do conflicts respond to harvest moratoria? But before we get into that, for number 2, in no more than 4 or 5 sentences below, please describe the historical context of the New Jersey black bear within which this research occurred. So to put this exponential increase in the black bear population in northwestern New Jersey into perspective spatially, we're talking about 3,500 black bears and that little dark spot right there. So there's New York City, there's Philadelphia. So 3,500 bears in a 2,500 square kilometer area. That equates to 1.3 black bears per square kilometer, putting the densities of bears in northwestern New Jersey on par with densities in southeast Alaska at rich salmon runs. And New Jersey is the state with the highest human density in the lower 48. Over the past 3 decades, that little dark spot has been surrounded by accelerating suburban development as human residents left the city for the suburbs and the exurbs. And the result? At the time of these analyses, the database had 26,582 reported human black bear interactions. In short, cultural carrying capacity has been reached in northwestern New Jersey, and this level of conflict is fiscally and socially unsustainable. Between 2001 and 2010, the New Jersey Division of Fish and Wildlife spent greater than $9 million on black bear management, and that's money that could have been used for habitat restoration or non-game species. So the database included, I pulled it, over 1,400 incidents of verified property damage, over 400 livestock kills, over 250 unprovoked pet attacks, and of course the 7 attacks on humans. And this was at the time of my analysis. I'm sure there's been more instances since then. And the reality is, New Jersey is a harbinger of the landscape transformation that's coming to much of the North American continent. I quote this Time article that came out just a few months after I started this project. As goes New Jersey, so goes America. Bears are growing fat on human hospitality from the outskirts of Los Angeles to the Beltway of Washington. It's not just bears either. It's bobcats in Dallas-Fort Worth. It's coyotes in Portland and Chicago. Mountain lions outside of LA. I argue that if we are going to conserve large mammals in the Anthropocene, it depends less upon what we do with our public lands, but more about increasing cultural carrying capacity across the wildland to urban landscape gradient in places just like northwestern New Jersey. Yet the question still arises, is there still a place in the manager's toolbox for socially divisive actions like harvest and the lethal control of problem bears?